I'm editing these videos, and it cracks me up. I didn't even think about my background. I've got stuff all over the place. Sorry about that. We're doing a lot of house renovations, so this being my office or another bedroom, everything just got dumped in here, and I don't care to find a better place or make things prettier for these videos. So this is the reality of side hustling, is working after hours at weird hours, and like my wife's feeding the baby right now, and this is the perfect alone time to squeeze in some extra work. Because I want my kid to have more stuff. Fun Christmases. So here we are. Qualification criteria. Let's get into what qualifies meetings as worthy of getting paid. So we need a prospect who is actively looking for a SaaS-based no-code or low-code platform for application development and process automation to reduce IT backlog. Fair enough. Do companies want to reduce IT backlog? If the answer is yes, that's 1 point toward getting paid. Point number 2, the prospect has a title of director or higher, and then there's some other mentions of relevant business units, departments, responsibilities, however that's laid out. It's a simple yes or no. The answer is yes. Prospect has an approved or funded digital transformation or citizen development initiative which has started or is starting in the next 3 to 6 months. I had a hard time with this statement in my first video about this company. And I don't know if I clarified it well enough. I just kind of reheard myself in editing that video, but it occurred to me to mention that, when I talk about working for a company as an SDR and getting paid for a meeting, I should clarify. I probably should have clarified back there, but there is a minimum expectation of qualification, and in most cases, you're going to get credit for getting a qualified meeting. And in my eyes, you can get a qualified meeting even if somebody's not going to be ready to buy for a year from now, because most SDRs still, at least as of this day, June of 2024, most SDRs are still evaluated based on kind of like number of activities, calls, emails, DMs, whatever, prospects added to sequence. You don't have to know what that means, but just the point is, like, a lot of SDRs are still evaluated based on activity metrics just to make sure they're staying busy. There are other teams that will only pay out commissions based on meetings held. So of course the number of meetings you book in a month is really important toward your commission earnings. So I can see myself where if I book a meeting and it's a great discovery call, but they're with a competitor and they don't want too much shelfware, which basically means software they buy that they don't use, or this overlap between applications that they buy. So they're like, yeah, I'll buy, but my renewal's in like 8 months. So, and I'm using that as an example since we have a 3 to 6 window. They could say, yeah, it's in 8 months, so let's pick this up. Like, I'm going to notify them I'm not renewing 60 days in advance, so let's connect, right around that time. And so, of course, you're thinking to yourself, well, shoot, am I not going to get paid when this is a very valid, totally honest, legit opportunity? Like, I don't know. To me, I know most of my bosses would approve something like that. In this case, they're saying, look, they've got to be ready to buy in 3 to 6 months. And if that's the case, fine. For all I know, this is going to be an easy opportunity. Maybe these guys have like 30-day, cycles, and that's fine. Or maybe they're just going to tell us, hey, you then follow up again. So I don't know. Whatever the case is, hopefully this isn't going to be as much of a problem as I made it sound before. And keep in mind, I'm not suggesting that if you work for a company that it's easier to get paid for the work you do. It's just looks different. So I might have been too harsh, but I do stand by what I said. I just hope it doesn't come off so harshly as it did when I was listening to myself in editing. So other questions. What are the biggest challenges surrounding? Okay, so this is a terrible title. So I guess this is trying to say, like, here are questions you can use to, as there's an influencer on LinkedIn, great sales coach. His name is Josh Braun. He has this model of what's called poking the bear. So as an SDR, you're in a weird spot because you want to poke the bear by asking provocative questions that challenge the person you're speaking to, the prospect you have on the phone. But in a way, you don't really want to open up a conversation, because as an SDR, your goal is to book the meeting. So you want to close that meeting, get that commitment to paper. You're not really supposed to be trying to build this whole business case with someone and ask these questions that unlock insights about the company and stuff. You're trying to just get that meeting in. Get them on the call, gather their interest, and if they're interested, kick them to the person who's better qualified, who's better trained to handle a discovery call where we understand what more about the prospect, go through a demo to show them the product. Let the AE or the account executive, let them handle that. As an SDR, you want to poke the bear to provoke them to think critically about your solution, but you don't necessarily want to try and lock them into a long conversation. You're just trying to validate a few things. So this first question, they're saying that if I have someone on the phone, I can ask them outright, what are the biggest challenges surrounding custom application building and process automation? That's fine. It's kind of an open-ended question, but like I just said, you don't really want to be running discovery in this early qualification call just to make sure that the meeting's going to be worth booking for you. So you kind of want to play the system here. Another way you could ask that to make it easier, and I say easier because here's something that's really important to sales psychology, I believe. It's that when you ask a question, and I heard this somewhere before, I'm trying to remember where I heard it from, but this isn't an original thought. When you ask someone a question, they are more than likely to respond in kind. Which basically means the way you ask a question, the type of question you ask, the words you use, that should influence the way that they respond. And so when you ask an open-ended question like that, you're very much trying to open up a conversation and dig into something, and that might, sometimes, it can be too much brain power for them to want to be engaged. Because think of the other person emotionally. If I called you on the phone with a cold call, how many cold calls have you received that you just hang up on? Or that you've just hung up on them? That's, it's a thing. People are not expecting your call. It's a disruption to their day, to their flow. They might be in the middle of something else or whatever. The point is they're going to be generally caught on their heels, and they'll say things like, I got a meeting, or I'm not interested, even though you haven't told them yet why you called, stuff like that. So when you ask an open-ended question like this, it requires more processing and brain power that they might not have been prepared or not be willing to do in that moment. So sometimes these questions will fail because of that. And in a lot of ways, when you're calling someone for the first time, you're really informing them more than you're trying to get them engaged in a conversation. So there are statistics out there where the most successful client calls are the ones where you have an even split of 50% you talking, 50% them talking. That's not true when you're trying to just book a meeting. At this early stage, we're going to talk more. We should be talking almost 70% of the time because we need to show them that we have value to bring, and that what we're talking about, if we're going to take up 70% of the 1 minute that a cold call will last, I think I read somewhere that the average cold call limit is never more than 70 seconds. The average, of course. Yes, many calls are longer, but many more are under a minute. So the average is not even barely over a minute is all you have to book a meeting, and that means you got to be on it. And to be on it means you have to have brevity. You have to be brief. You have to be punchy. You have to be. There's one of my buddies told me that he had a boss that said being in sales means you have to be brief, you have to be bright, and you have to be gone. You got to get in and get out. Get in, get your stuff done, get the commitment, and move on to the next. So I don't take issue with the question. I just think it's something to keep in mind. If they're using that to open up a conversation when you're making cold calls, it's a pretty heavy lift. Or maybe it's not, because here's the other thing. Maybe this is a very common question, and IT thinks about it all the time, and it is an easy answer. So I don't know, and we'll find out as I make calls. I can certainly test different ways of poking the bear to keep people on the phone and add value to the conversation. So another question is, what are your current plans for addressing these challenges? Okay, so it's a follow-up question. Again, very heavy lift to ask of somebody, like, what are your plans for it? It's like, why should I tell you? I've been talking to you for not even 10, 15 seconds, right? Should I trust you? Maybe they need an NDA in place just to talk to a vendor. We don't know anything about them. And these questions are pretty pointed. Hopefully, relevant enough and accepted enough in the industry. But again, we'll find out. And then question number 3 is, what is required to get a project to address the challenge off the ground? Okay, so it's 3 compounded questions. You start with, what are your challenges with building custom applications or process automation? And then they'll tell you one thing or another, and then you ask, what are your current plans, if they didn't mention it or volunteer it up front? And then lastly, well, what's it going to take? What's it going to take to get that challenge off the ground? Is it going to be talking about ROI? Is it talking about getting the other people involved, the right people? Is it a matter of money? Have we thought this is too expensive? Do we know what this should cost? There's a lot that can come up. These would be better, in my opinion, these are better discovery questions than they are SDR questions, but I'm only saying that because of the way they're phrased. I could probably spin these around with a little thought to make them still be a part of a script, but ultimately, just be more like relevant for the context of it's a first time connect and cold call and stuff. So anyway, I've taken up enough of your time. Qualification criteria is pretty simple, so let's move on to the next section.